So welcome everyone to this community and strategy meeting for the 1st of February. Amazing that we are already in February, so yeah, the pace continues. My thing says I've got a few health and safety measures to talk to you about, but I'll let you sort all that out for yourself. Toilets, evacuation and earthquake procedures at your space. But one thing I would highlight is that this is being recorded, and also can you make sure that your phones are on silent mode. So we will move through to apologies. Are there any apologies? No, not that we are aware of. So we then, no leave of absence have been requested. Sorry. Any conflicts of interest? Don't suppose there is. And then we have public forum, and I invite Shelley Delaney to speak to us.
Sorry, just before you move, Madam Chair, didn't we have an apology for a lateness from Councillor Menzies?
She's in here.
I'll shut up.
Well, it looks like she's here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I just wanted to take this time. I was actually the lucky recipient of the Eric Hawkes Memorial Outward Bound Scholarship this year. I thought I'd take the time to present back to this committee just what I found, and I took a few photos to share for those that sort of don't know too much about it. So I'm going to have a go at sharing my screen with a couple of pictures while I read this to you. Share screen. Knew this would happen. There we go. Share. Can you guys see that?
Yep. Yes.
Cool. Make it.
Great.
Sorry, now I've lost what I was reading. Oh, technology is great. Excellent. Oh, no. Apologies, guys.
It's all good. Look, I'm sorry to interrupt. My wife tells me that this meeting is not coming up on her screen. It's just the service and assets.
Is that this is a different meeting, so maybe that's where the problem is.
It wasn't coming up under that. Just a moment, please.
Just carry on with the meeting and we'll get the technical stuff sorted out in the background.
It's just come up now.
Okay, I can't do the slideshow and two screens because I'm not that technically savvy. So I apologise for that. I'll flick them through them at the end.
Thanks,
so I was lucky enough to be this year's recipient, which took me to Anakiwa, which is the start of the Queen Starlet Sound near Picton, to attend an 8-day discovery course. Outward Bound New Zealand was established in 1962, and it was an organisation that showed people their full potential through outdoor challenge and adventure. They believed in learning through doing and building transferable skills and attitudes that last for life. Each course is tailored to the individual watch group to not only challenge them physically, but mentally as well. Some courses are physically strenuous, while others offer more time for self-reflections. Through the experience of the instructors you have, the watcher's input, the course is actually tailored to you. I had always wanted to do this course for the outdoor challenge, to test myself, have a bit of a break from my cell phone, and be a bit of a role model to my kids. From day one, I realised this was a lot more than I expected. You were put into a watch group, which we only had 9 in our group, and we did a we did a lot of physical challenges. We did rowing, sailing, tramping, paddled a double hulled waka. But the challenges I didn't expect were the most rewarding to come out of this. There was a bit of public speaking, teaching or sharing the experiences you had, working as a group, heights, solitude, and of course, all of this pushing your personal boundaries. One of my favourite activities we did was something called coasteering at Whites Bay. This involved moving along like a rocky coastline on your feet, or a swimming where you had to, a swim through 2 rock tunnels and jumping off rock ledges into the sea. The instructors fully believe in challenge by choice, and the students were presented with the opportunity to push themselves to their limit, but recognises that is different for everyone. What might be challenging for one person may be in a walk in a park for others. I was really proud to do all 3 jumps off the cliff because I really struggled on a high ropes course earlier in the course. So it amazed me how the course had changed my mindset to not overthink things and just have a go. So you took a look into the ledge and jumped into the surging sea. You do a solo experience. We did 2 nights in the bush. This gives you a break from the physical activities that you do. I enjoyed this time. It was really nice. We had good weather, which made it easy, and you got to reflect on life. They had handed you a blank journal, and you got to fill it up. At the end of the course, the graduation ceremony happened as a group. You planted a tree, which will one day grow and be part of the other trees as part of it, and that was you making a difference and helping that area out environmentally. You're offered your badge and your graduation, which you also got the choice to accept it or not, because everyone went to this course for a different reason. So some felt they accepted it and some didn't, which was really quite moving. And everyone presented to each other, not the instructors to us, and everyone spoke about why they presented it to people. It was hugely emotional, and realised how close you had got to a group of people you didn't know so quickly. And then we were given a baton at the end, which was for us to pass it on to somewhere else. Enrolling in Outward Bound really was one of the best decisions I've made. I was challenged, I learned, I cried, I had fun, I met heaps of great people. I came away a bit battered and bruised, but invigorated and full of life, and really, really wanted to take this time to thank the Southland District Council and you as a committee for offering this scholarship up for people to get out what they can out of this opportunity. So I really, am stoked. Yeah, I'll just share a couple of quick photos, just so you can sort of see what we went through. So that was, you get a photo of your group at the start, and we had 2 instructors, and they were lovely, never worked together and just did it really well. We did sailing the first couple of nights, and some people had never been in a boat or knew what to do. That's your accommodation that you stay in. And that's a bit bigger. Very much a bit army styles, had to be tidy all the time and pack your gear away, which didn't hurt any of us. This is the coasteering, where you jump into the ocean and look after each other as a group. That was the high ropes, and it really was high, extremely high, and very challenging for a lot of us. That's your solo in the bush. You basically just got a canvas and somewhere to lie, and you had a couple of days. They gave you a little brown bag, a little bit of food to eat, but you didn't do too much. And I had a goat visit me on my overnighter, so I had a little bit of company. You climbed a hill. That was a massive day. So just amazing place to be in, really was. And on your solo, you also had to give back to your group. And I wrote a wee ode to the Blake Watch, because they're an amazing group of people. And each one of those persons come out and did a different thing. And it was quite interesting to see what they all come up with. And I was just going to leave you with this. Inside each of us are 2 wolves. One is evil. It is anger, envy, sorrow, regret. One is joy. One is good. It is joy, peace, love, hope, serenity. And the wolf that wins will be the one that you feed the most. And that was a saying that really resonated with our group, the Blake Watch. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Shelley. That's great to hear the impact that it's had. And yes, we've just done a few of the interviews for the public ones in the last couple of weeks. And yeah, again, it's been a really enlightening experience for Councillor Menzies and Councillor Scott that were on the committee with me. And so yeah, it's great to have that feedback and know how much of an impact that it makes. So thank you very much and go well.
Just one comment, Madam Chair. I'm sure that Eric, who gave the ultimate sacrifice in '98, I was certainly part of that search, but he'd be very proud of the way he's been remembered.
Yes, it's something that we should never forget. Yeah, the reason why behind that. But yeah, thank you very much for those words, Mutong. And thank you, Shelley. That was great. So we will move on to the minutes for there being no extraordinary or urgent items. We'll move on to the minutes of the previous meeting for confirmation.
Madam Chair, there's no minutes to
Yes,
confirm
yeah,
from the
I'm just-
meeting.
Right, that's a wee trap for players, isn't it? So moving right along then, we now have moved to page 10, where we have 7.1, the draft Stewart Island Rakiura Visitor Levy bylaw and policy. And we have Carrie Williams, the Senior Policy Analyst, to introduce it, and welcome John Spraggan, Chair of the Stewart Island Rakiura Community Board, to be in attendance for this item. Over to you, Carrie.
Thank you. Tina koutou katoa. As you know, the purpose of this report is for the committee to consider and provide feedback on the draft visitor levy policy and bylaw. I'll assume my sound's okay unless I get a hand up or something like that. I'd like to take the report as read, outline a few key points, and then invite John to provide Rakiura Community Board input on the report before turning to questions and discussion. So as we're all aware, the levy is a really unique instrument due to the challenge of meeting visitor-related needs for an incredibly special place where there are approximately 40,000 visitors per year and 400 ratepayers. Accordingly, the purpose of the levy is to alleviate the burden to island ratepayers due to high visitor numbers. The main reason for the review of this bylaw and policy right now is in relation to the quantum of the levy, and this is reflected in the emphasis of the information that's been provided to you. However, as with formal review of any policy or bylaw, it is open to council to propose other changes. The outcome of pre-consultation in September showed that there is general support for an increase in the levy from $5 to $10. Further, the results from the Great South survey that were presented to this committee in November spoke to how highly visitors rate their experiences on the island, to the extent that 93% said they would return. There's no information to suggest an unwillingness to pay the levy or an increase by visitors. This is in contrast to feedback from residents who do not pay the levy, but many of whom provide services to visitors who have a range of views on the levy quantum. Anecdotal information indicates that visitor demand is not restricted by the cost of the island, but by the finite amount of accommodation to be found. So turning right into the forecasted funding needs in the report, I'm just going to outline a few points there. So all the projects that are identified in that list at attachment E meet the requirements of the Empowering Act as eligible for levy funding. You guys have heard this all before. So activities that visitors use, that benefit visitors, or that mitigate the adverse environmental effects of visitors. So these have been the statutory criteria to determine what projects are eligible since the levy's inception. It's not for council, it's not within council's power to change this provision. So shifting to what we've got in front of us, these LTP projects and the input from community groups have been used because they're easily recognizable to all of us. We know what's out there. I'd also like to emphasize the points made at paragraph 39, and that is that when we're modeling what the levy specifically would go towards, this is seriously limited by the fact that first, it's uncertain what projects will actually apply for levy funding, especially with regards to community group. And moreover, and second, is that whether the subcommittee will grant funding in any particular situation is at that subcommittee's full discretion. So I just really want to point out that the methodology is not to be equated with the actual spend here. It's integral to keep these two sort of variables or uncertainties, whatever you want to call them, in mind when looking at the funding scenarios. So the intent is not to say that funding will be granted to a particular project at X amount. It's to show what these overall funding needs are for island visitor-related activities to evaluate an appropriate levy quantum. So you'll see in the report, there's 4 different scenarios which allocate a different percentage of visitor benefit. And depending on which scenario, it indicates the levy would need to increase to somewhere between $11 and $30. To cross-check this, modeling has also been done running annual depreciation, and this does yield a similar result. I haven't provided this, but just it's a cross-check method that we've looked into. So if no change is made to the project's plan for the island, there is likely to be a shortfall of funding if the levy were to remain at $5. Without other funding sources, the projects would need to be fully funded by rates, or the project would need to be deferred. So this forecasting information isn't intended to provide a magic number, but it allows a framework within which to balance the funding needs, the impacts on rates, the visitor willingness to pay the levy, and formal consultation will allow council to consider community views on its preferred option in conjunction with all this information. So one proposed change that sits apart from the quantum that I just want to go over is that of the proposed increase to multi-year funding for infrastructure projects. So the current policy sits this at up to 10 years, and it's proposed to increase this to up to 30 years for infrastructure in exceptional circumstances. And the reason behind this is to better share the costs of a project across the lifetime of the expenditure. Just going to touch on next steps before we launch into discussion. So subject to any changes this committee recommends, a statement of proposal will be presented to council at its next meeting with a recommendation of formal consultation in March. And the statement of proposal will reflect council's preferred option here. So it is recognized that the island is still likely to be busy in March with visitors, but due to the need for hearings, deliberations, and adoptions all before the end of June, as is required by our contracts with the operators, this is sort of the latest period that we can run this. Yeah, those are the main points. I mean, I could probably go on a bit and then you'd probably send me on an outward bound trip, but I will turn it over to John. If you have any comments, please. I think you're on mute. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, the board does have comments, as amazing as it may be. You mentioned the cost of getting to the island. As you possibly know, I work for the ferry company, and I'm not speaking on behalf of them, but a comment that is coming up quite regularly this year, in particular from family groups, where the husband and wife would pay the visitor levy for a day trip, is the cost of a ferry fare. So adding the extra bit onto it could make an effect in there, but that's only on the side. In principle, though, the Stewart Island Community Arakura Community Board certainly supports the need for an increase in the visitor levy, but believes that an increase to $15 is excessive. During the consultation stage that's led up to here, when you met with island groups and met with the board and others, a majority of those, as you have stated, were in favour of an increase up to the $10 figure. But this draft bylaw that we've been given seems to have ignored this and gone ahead with the 15. perhaps an option recommending the increase of $10 in the options would make it look as if consultation had actually been required and was a vital part of it. In addition to that, though, in future years, the board would support a smaller increment sort of on the cost of living being added to it at, say, every 3 years or something in that matter, if it could be built into it. Board feels that the figures in the discussion document have sort of been distorted by the including of items that we feel should not at this stage, although you've explained that they are allowed, but at this stage should not be part of the costings for the basis of an increase. And the ones that in particular that we're referring to, for DOC, some years ago, they gave the Stewart Island Community Board all the tracks that they had previously run in the community board area, and those are now the responsibility of the community board and are funded out of our rates. People going onto the DOC land, if they go direct onto it, do not pay the visitor levy, and I'm sure that DOC is quite capable of getting funding from other sources without dipping into the visitor levy money. Another one that we have concern with is the sewage, wastewater. I believe that this was funded on a district-wide basis and was part of our rates as in all the other communities. And as such, the island is no different to any other community. I notice in the council report that is to be presented to our next board meeting that tenders have been called for toilet replacements across the whole of Southland, costing 1.9 million. And I would expect that if the main toilets on the island should be treated exactly the same way, if they needed replacement, upgraded or refurbished, and they should be part of a Southland-wide plan, not a direct charge on the community. The exception to this, though, is that in discussions with the board, we do acknowledge there are 1 or 2 other toilets on the island that if they required upgrade, then the board may be responsible. And I'm thinking of Motorau in particular here. On the waste services and rubbish collection, this is a commercial operation undertaken by our power supply. And as such, any capital expenditure, such as a new truck, should be funded from the charges that they make and shouldn't be charged against the visitor levy. The moteliers and everyone and the visitors are already paying to have the rubbish picked up as part of their costs of being on the island. And the visitor levy to us shouldn't be used for this purposes. But while we're on that topic, the board also believes that this operation on the island needs a total review, as under its present format, it is very, very inefficient and certainly not a cost-effective operation. The power supply, regardless of whether the island has visitors, our reticulation system requires updates and has to exist. We can't cut it back. We certainly don't extending the reticulation. The cost of the generation is charged back against the operators, the people who use the power. And while it's been suggested that visitors are increasing the use of the power, I think that perhaps one of the biggest increases in the use of power on the island is because the Stewart Islanders are going off having coal or wood fire burners, and for sheer convenience, we're all putting in heat pumps. And this is making the big draw off on power in relation to the island. The visitors, as I said, are already paying as part of their accommodation, etc. And we don't believe that we should be allocating extra funds into the electricity supply. The items that are included in the board's long-term plan, and I noticed that they are quite substantial and they're very expensive, they were actually put there as a wish list. because in previous years, we've had a great deal of difficulty adding to the long-term plan. So this time, when we put out our 10-year long-term plan, we decided we would throw in every project that we sort of had possibly in mind, but certainly with no intention that within 10 years that we would complete them. If we suddenly got all the money, yes, we would, but it's certainly not an intention that we'd get it. And as far as it's a wish list, and we only go ahead with a project if the funding source was found. And a perfect example is last year when we had in our long-term plan, well, actually it's this year, last year, for a path to go from Mill Creek towards Butterfields Beach, which was reliant on an allocation out of the visitor levy. We made an application. We did not receive funding for it. So the board decided that it was not viable to do that project this year. And we've now put it forward into our next year. And we are putting it forward as an application to the visitor levy for next year. There is question from the board about why there are 3 approved transport operators present on the subcommittee. Yes, they do collect the money, but do they actually have the interest of the island community at heart? And given to the non-existence of cruise ships, and in the future could be very limited use of cruise ships on relation to the island, the question of the cruise ship industry, ISS Mackay's representation on that board. We certainly agree that major community infrastructure projects, in particular, such as, and I'm probably thinking here in charge of the wharves, that are going to require a loan, then they should be able to have funding allocated to them for 30 years so that you can actually budget for the duration of that loan without having to worry. Applications for operational costs, the board believes should only be 1 year and not be for multiple years, as this would then allow the organisations that are applying for financial or operational costs time to reorganise themselves and to restructure and to reorganise themselves so that they actually operate within their budgeted financial constraints. If we allocate money for 2 or 3 years, there's no guarantee that, you know, they actually are going to look at their financial affairs and see what's going wrong. They'll just keep going as they are. We believe that funding rounds should be only on an annual basis. And I know there was one back in 2017, was it? Where we put a special one in, but we actually believe they should only be on an annual basis, and that makes people actually plan and budget. And we've got a comment here on protocol. We feel that, and as that the allocations committee require training in their role as part of this committee prior to the meeting to allocate funds, and that they need to realise that they have to operate under standing orders, because I think on occasions on the past, this has not occurred and personal feelings have affected the decision making by some of them. So basically that's where the board comes from.
Thank you for that comprehensive coverage there, John, and it's great to hear the feedback from the community board, and trust that you do not get feel like we're totally ignoring you as part of the process that we seem, this convoluted process that we seem to have to go through for through consultation and then into having a proposal and getting the official line back to us eventually. So thank you very much for your comments there. And
Don't worry, we will come back again at the next stage.
great, thank you. Mayor Tong.
Sorry, with all due respect to Chairman John, we've just heard a submission. I don't think we were here for that today, just my personal view. I do thank you for your comments, John, but I thought we were here to discuss what we were going to be doing going forward in regards to setting a start, because we do need to start this process. And yeah, what I've heard is certainly part of a very good submission going forward. It's just a comment, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And yes, it is part of the process that we are starting now. We have previously consulted on the ideas and for the where the direction that the thing needs to head in. And now this is where we, with this proposal that the staff have put together, this is where we start getting feedback and input to make it go forward and to the formal process and a formal decision following that process. So any other comments people want to make? I can't see anyone on the, oh yes, Councillor Ford.
Of course I couldn't go without saying something. And certainly John's words there were probably similar to what mine will be in relation to the community as such. And this is the people that we've been listening to. And in this current economic climate with COVID, whilst we are doing okay, we're not to know how long that goes. So it is a suggestion from community that to go to $15 might be too much in one step. So we believe there is some community acceptance of going at $10 at this stage. It could still go further at some other time. Now that would be what I would ask, that the figure be amended to $10 as part of that resolution, due course, but also on some of the topics that are put in there. And I've made notes similar to what probably John has got. Some of the things such as the waste service, it does pay its own way, and it would help with some other management, we believe. And certainly the more waste we make, the more people will pay for it. So the visitor in their own right is paying it indirectly. And of course, sites are in the same role. This is more electricity used in the accommodation sectors. The visitors are in fact paying for that in their own right. So that is totally irrelevant to the usage. Sewage, the same, the district sewage. If we put a contribution into there, as council, are we going to charge the likes of Tiana or Riverton or Milford a different charge for their sewage? And so whilst we have district charging there, where do we separate that? And I am cautious that we would make a rod for our back by separating it. Also, as John said, some of our toilets need refurbishment, and we'd have to agree with that. And they should be just a one-off as required. They can go to Vista Levy and we can manage that without too much trouble. Parks and reserves, we do a bit of work on that, and those things are relevant as well. Jetties, you've all heard a lot about jetties, and if they go to the loan facility that John's mentioned in the 30-year arrangement, and of course we do expect to be applying for government funding here and there, so we would expect to be part of that. And the LTP, as John said, is just a wish list for funding. We've started it off. We would like to do all those things. Often it's a matter of cutting the cloth to suit. And certainly as far as DOC are concerned, in the very original arrangements for this levy, DOC stipulated that they didn't want to be part of it, and consequently that's why the levy was made for visitors into the village rather than other parts of DOC estate. So I believe that they really should not be eligible. They've got plenty of their own government funding, that they should be doing their own thing, and they probably don't. but that's up to them to have a go at. We do a fair deal around here on our own tracks that Doc had given us, as John said. So that's sort of just an endorsement to where the community thinks we should be. But certainly to add too much money to the fair at this stage might just be too much too quick. We perhaps should better take it in smaller steps. So that would be my words on that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Ford. And that it is an interesting concept, this, because we, this in any increase will not come into effect until October 2023, which whilst the years do roll round, it's still 18 months out at this stage, and so who knows what the world will look like, or what we will be doing then, and whether that, how much influence that is. But this is just part of the process, isn't it? So thank you for your contribution there, Councillor Ford. Councillor Harper.
Yes, Madam Chair. Just a query there on the excluded visitors. Somebody visiting the island for a continuous period of 21 days or more is exempt. Why? What's the rationale behind that? I would have thought if they're visiting the island, spending 15 days walking tracks, they still want to use the facilities in the village for 5 or 6 days. So, yeah, just maybe a bit of enlightenment on that, please.
Madam Chair, I think the intent there is that the information we have indicates that a visit that long is unusual and would typically be a contractor working on the island, and not a visitor in the conventional sense. But that's my understanding of the reason for that timing.
Is that not covered under item B, though, or under contract? Is employed or under contract to work on a transport vehicle, or yeah.
Yeah, very said, George. That's precisely right. If they're more than 21 days, we sort of believe that we've caught them, they're coming into work. So that it's probably a triviality. There may not be a lot of money in that. So difficult enough to track them as it is without having too many obstacles.
Yeah, you're right. Okay, thank you.
Hope that explains that. Councillor Duffy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a question about the process. So if we go through this consultation and don't go with $15, do we have to go back to the drawing board again, or have we got the ability to amend the amount as part of the one process?
Madam Chair, it's a good question, Councillor Duffy. Certainly, as I said, the intent is that council ought to go out for consultation on its preferred option, which is not to say that after receiving and considering feedback, it can't consider a different amount. There's technicalities about making sure we ensure that the range of options council is envisioning are included in the statement of proposal. That's more an operational matter.
Thank you.
Councillor Douglas. You're on mute. Sorry, John.
Is that better?
Yes.
Yeah, just thinking back to the process that we followed last time, and we did consider raising it to $10, and then we finally settled on $15. And looking back at the process that followed on from that, I think it was a bridge too far. And the concept was supported by many people, but the actual quantum of the increase was too great for many to stomach. And I think we are steering down a similar scenario this time round. So, I mean, I'm fully in favour of user pays and that. So it might seem strange that I would be supporting a lesser increase than the one that's proposed through this report.
Thank you, Councillor Douglas. So, so going forward, the information that we receive this would be a question for you, Carrie, around the quantum. So it is preferable that what we go forward with from now is what council's preferred option is, and that, but it isn't impossible to actually come out with something with a different, go through with a different, come back with a different figure.
Madam Chair, you're absolutely correct, and the reason it's a bit grey in this area because it's a bit of a spectrum. If council came back after this is absolutely a hypothetical. If council indicated it's considering $5, $10, $15 and went out for consultation on a preferred option of, let's say, $15, and then came back to the table and said, no, we want 30. That wouldn't be permissible because that wasn't contemplated. It wasn't on the table of what went out to the community. So the most important thing is to ensure that the full range of options that council is considering is out there on the table for the community, but that, as we've talked about, council needs to select its preferred option so that the community knows now where it sits.
So my understanding is what we have here is that if we go forward with this as it is written in the recommendations, we still have those that is part of our proposal going out to the community, and we can hear back from them if when they have another, that they prefer one of the other options.
Correct.
Thank you. So Michelle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just also wanted to remind the recommendation today is for this committee to make a recommendation to council, so that decision won't be made until the 22nd of February council meeting.
Thank you. Yes, this is a recommendation to council. So Councillor Ford, your hand is up again.
Sorry,
Yes,
just before you carry on, Madam Chair, just be careful of predetermined bias here, please, councillors.
Yes, that's certainly. On the basis of how I spoke previously, I believe it's a step too big at one whack, and I would like to amend that 15 back to 10, so that might ease it through the system in the earlier days. It could perhaps be changed at a later stage, but I would expect we would get opposition at 15. 10 would probably ease it, and I would like to make that amendment to that, if that was possible, please.
So where are we? Hello, Nicole.
Hi. I guess I just wanted to make a comment through you, Madam Chair, just in regards to, the modelling that we've done is to look at what the infrastructure costs are over the longer term. So we're not looking, we weren't looking from the perspective of what the residents might be happy with or what the visitors might be happy with. We're all looking at what are the infrastructure costs that the island are looking at facing, and based on that, at a holistic level, what should we be seeking in terms of a contribution from visitors for that? So we understand this is a political process, but it's also important to emphasise that if those projects go ahead and we don't have that visitor levy input, then that funding will have to come from another source. And unless we get grant funding, or as the chair of the Stewart Island Community Board has indicated that we don't go ahead with some of those projects, then that money will need to come from rates or from the charges that we charge for waste or CA, which are paid largely by those residents on the island. So the visit, you need to look at the visitor levy as one of the funding sources that we use for this infrastructure. Okay, so it's one of the funding tools that we have along with all of the other ones. And we're sort of trying to say, well, if we look at the long-term costs that are there, potentially we need quite a bit more money from the visitors to contribute to those higher costs that we're looking at over the long term.
Thank you, Nicole. Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, just sort of further on that, the thinking that I've got as well, when you're looking at the fact, like you said before, it's 18 months into the future when this actually starts, and the fact that the visitors are outnumbering the ratepayers by 100 to 1. And like I must admit, when this sort of first came out years ago, I wasn't that in favour of it for a lot of the reasons that have been discussed out in public and today. But when you look at the impact on the ratepayers going through the long-term plan process and the pressure that's on such a small ratepayer base, not just on the island, but in Southland for the district stuff as well, I just think more of that user pays type model is the way to go for this. And I think that if we cut it too short now for it to kick in 18 months' time, and we do find that there's a shortfall, it's going to be very hard to increase it down the track because you're sort of chasing your tail the whole way down. So I do think we need to look at larger amounts now and not write them off just yet.
Thank you. My calculations that by the time we get any change implemented or the change that's planned here implemented, it will have been $5 for 20 years. So when $5 came in, it was probably quite a lot more in terms of people's travel costs to the island than potentially what 15 is, if that, like what we're proposing here is. So it's an interesting concept, really. So we now going forward, Councillor Ford, were you proposing something different at this stage, or are you happy with the current recommendation?
I would like to propose that it be amended to $10 rather than 15.
And I'm prepared to second that motion if it's required, Madam Chair.
So going forward, I might need some advice on that one.
Excuse me, Councillor Case. As you don't have the substantive motion on the table for everybody to amend at this point in time, because there could be other councillors that want to stick with the 15, so you would have to move the substantive motion as it is in the officer's report, and then councillors Ford and Douglas could then put their amending E1 to $10, and then that would be voted on. If that passes, then that becomes your new substantive motion.
Thank you for that advice. Councillor Menzies.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to move option 1.
So that is the recommendation as it stands on page 12. Is that what you?
Yes, I'm just looking back at the page. I was looking at page 24.
Yep. That's option 1.
That the committee recommend council endorses a draft policy and draft bylaw with any desired amendments for consultation in accordance with a special consultative procedure that includes a proposal to increase the levy quantum to $15.
I'm happy to second it.
Okay. CMR.
I was just going to make a comment there and second it as well, but it's already been done, which is fine. But just remember, this has still got to go out for public consultation, folks.
Yes. Yeah. So that is moving the recommendation as option 1, which is option 1, and the recommendation that is on page 12. So that has been moved by Councillor Menzies and seconded by Councillor Ruddenclaw.
Yep, here's where Councillor Ford and Councillor Douglas would come in to put their amendment.
Certainly that amendment, please, if we can.
All right. So if Councillor Ford is moving that the increase is from 5 to 10, then I'm willing to second that motion. Or it's that amendment.
I'll move that.
So now we have Councillor Ford moving an amendment to the quantum of the figure to an E1 to $10. And
so you put this if there's no more debate on it.
So any further debate? Councillor Menzies, your do you want to speak again?
No, I'm happy with the discussion so far.
Thank you. Councillor Harper.
Yes, Madam Chair. While I agree with Councillor Ford and Councillor Douglas, I do agree with some of your comments that by the time this goes through and another 2 years down the track, $10 may not be sufficient and we're going to have to change it again. So I'm quite happy also to support the current proposal.
Thank you for that comment. We probably need to put the amended proposal with the recommendation with E.
No, just move E1, amending E1.
Right, thank you. So I'll put it to the vote then that E1 is changed to $10, the proposed to increase the Stewart Island Recce or visitor levy quantum to $10. Can I have a show of hands on that? All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye.
Looks
all,
like
all those against?
Aye. Against.
No.
yeah, that's lost.
So that's lost. So we go back to the original proposed or original recommendation that the proposal to increase it to the levy quantum to $15, and I'll put that to the vote, that recommendation to the vote. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against.
Against, no.
Did you get them, Fiona?
Do you wish to have your dissenting votes recorded?
Yes, please.
So the majority there would that is moved then.
It's
correct?
carried, yeah.
Carried by the majority. Thank you all for your contributions and debate today. There being no further business.
Through you, Madam Chair, I just want to confirm that the rest of the recommendations are also in order and no changes to be made to them.
That was what was agreed, yes. The special consultative process, etc. Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you. So that being the end of business, I will declare the meeting closed. Thank you for your attendance.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Now you've got Anna and Steve here for the workshop.
Thank you. So thank you. So don't go
Do you
away.
want me to stop the live stream?
Yes, please.
Cool. 1 second. Where's the live stream?
More next to end.